Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. As always, it's me, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu in downtown Old Melbourne, Australia. Just heading into spring. It's just started now. Thank goodness the winter season's been wrapped up and put away on the shelf for another year, and it's time to start looking forward with a smile on the dial because we're starting to get some new growth. There's lots of good things happening around the place, and it's really positive. I love spring because it's the start of it all again. You know, that next round of growth that we get, and all the excitement about that next step that our trees take. That's now. That's happening now for us. So it's really good. You know, it's made me sit back and think about the last 3 or 4 days about the turbulent times of bonsai. It sounds crazy for such a peaceful and such a relaxing hobby that you know we all partake in, but really it's at the pointy end. It's really quite turbulent. You know, you go from being neck deep in soil and pots and potting mesh to packing that up on one day, and next day you're getting out the fertilizer and you're laying out bags and bags and bags of tea bags to fill up, getting ready for the first round of fertilising for the spring season. You know, you're constantly changing from one thing to the next, and that's part of the joy of it, I think. And what I love about it is that you are always busy. It's not like painting a picture or writing a story or something like that, because there's no end to it. It's just perpetual. It goes on and on for as long as we're interested in partaking in the seasonal work that's needed for high quality bonsai. I love it. It's been very busy lately. I sat back after packing up all the tools, and I thought, you know, I like to reflect on a lot of things. Like, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? What did I miss? What's going to change next time I do things so I can be more efficient or better at what I do? You know, because I think that continual learning in how I look after my trees and my equipment and myself, it has to change. You know, you have to adapt. You sort of never want to sit in the one spot doing the same thing over and over, because you know, doing the same thing expecting a different result is, you know, it's crazy, because you're going to get the same result every time. So I thought, what lessons have I learnt from the 2020 season of repotting my exotics? First was to be prepared, which I think I did pretty well this year. You know, I'd planned nice and early back in February. It's about my potting mix, making sure I had all the components ready to go, and that was lucky, because look what happens come March when, you know, the world turns on its head and suddenly, you know, supply chains for different components suddenly become a bit more awkward and difficult to obtain. You can still get stuff, definitely, in this new brave world that we're all living in, but it certainly did me wonders being prepared for that, and also for a lot of people that rely on me to make sure that I've got things planned, so when it gets to their turn to repot their bonsais, I can be a constant, reliable source of supply. And that this year worked out really, really well. So last year I think I left it till March or April, and I thought it was just a bit close to the wire. So this year I did it in February. Everything worked out really well. The other thing that I did a little bit better this year was making sure that I'd clearly identified trees that needed to be repotted. By doing that, it meant that I could allocate the correct amount of time to repotting. You know, turning around and saying, okay, well, this weekend is my repotting weekend. That might be too much time. There might be nowhere near enough time. It all depends on how much work you've got to get done and how big the trees are and what work they need doing as well. You know, taking something from a black pot, a grow pot, into a bonsai pot is a lot of work, and that can take a lot of time. And the last thing that you want is to feel that you're rushed and you need to urgently do something because you've only got 3 hours and you've got 8 trees to repot. It's not the case. It's everything that you work on that's in front of you should be given 100% and 10% of your focus. And that should be your only thing that you're thinking about at the time. It's not what's next and how quickly can I get through this to the next point, because bonsai is all about the fine detail. It's about the small things. It's about making sure that everything that we do is done perfectly. It's being fastidious with things. It's making sure that you're not rushing and not cutting corners, because there's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts at all. There's no hedge pruning. There's no getting the chainsaw out to prune your branches in 10 seconds when you need to sit down properly and plan what you're doing. Shortcuts get you so far, but sooner or later you're going to have to pay for it, and you're going to have to correct what you've done in the long run. So it's that one step forward. Taking one step backwards, take 2 steps forward, or do you take the 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards? And that's all in your planning. So this year I flagged a lot of the trees that I need to repot, and made sure that when I worked out the sheer volume that I had the stock and the materials available, so I didn't get halfway through repotting and go, hang on a minute, I don't have enough pumice, or I don't have enough scoria, or I don't have enough potting mesh, or I don't have enough pots to put these trees into. I made sure that was all planned to precision. So I also made sure that my tools that I use were all in pristine condition, and if I need to replace any of them, that was done on, well and truly before I got into the season. So everything's sharp, everything's clean, everything's well maintained, and everything's ready to go. Because we're only as good as our tools. If you're sitting there and you're fine hair pruning the fine roots, and you're making sure that everything's perfect, but the scissors you're using like getting 2 bits of wood together and clunking it against the roots, well, you're not really going to achieve much. You're going to spend a lot of time not getting the result that you want. So, I made sure my tools were okay. I made sure my equipment was good. Made sure I had enough supplies of everything I wanted. And also made sure that I had my pots lined up ready to go too. So if I was bringing a tree into the workshop and I thought, this tree would look great in a new pot, and here's the new pot. And I'd go, okay, well, it might also look pretty good in that pot as well. I would take the additional 2 pots that I was looking at as future options for the tree. I would prep those, I would wire them up, I would get the potting mesh in them, I would have the base layer of scoria, I would have the layer of my mix over the top of the scoria with a mound in the middle, all ready to go before I even touched the tree that I was going to repot and take out of its original pot to move into something more special. So I was really fastidious about that this time, and making sure that I had enough room to have everything set up in the workshop so I could quickly move from one to the next. So I wasn't rushed, but I was very efficient with my time. So I definitely made sure that I'd allowed enough time and I didn't exceed my expectations. So really, with repotting, finishing as a ballpark, towards the end of August, I finished the last one of my trees on about the 29th. So I had a couple of days up my sleeve ahead of when I'd planned to finish. So it all worked out really well. By having enough time too, as I was working through, there was a couple of big junipers that were coming out of grow pots and going back into grow pots, and I find that sort of root work is quite time consuming and draining, because you're doing the foundation work that will be shown later in the nabari on the tree when it's put into a bonsai pot. So if you're rushing through something and you're just hacking through stuff and you're not actually thinking about what's going to grow, what the nabari is going to look like, what should I do now as foundation work for this bonsai going forward, you're not going to achieve the result that you want. You're going to end up with something that maybe has a beautiful trunk and beautiful foliage and nice pads and whatever else, but there's something going to be flawed because you've taken a bit of a shortcut and you've just hacked into it. And that's what I think having enough time meant for me anyway, was that I didn't have to plough through the roots with a saw, whereas I could use my rake and work my way through them slowly and selectively go, well, too thick, too heavy, got to go. Nice and fine, I'll save you. You're a nice root that could develop suddenly into a basal root spread on the back side of the tree. So I'm gonna do some work on you and make sure that I can grow and nurture you, so you become significant later on in the tree's structuring and styling. So, if I had 3 trees lined up ready to go and it took me all day to do one tree, I didn't feel bad at the end of it. I didn't look at it and go, you really should have got all 3 trees done. I looked at it and went, you've done a really good job with that tree that you've worked on, and you've still got 2 more to do, but don't worry, because you've allowed enough time in your repotting schedule to make sure that you're not going to be feeling that pressure later on. And I think that time factor is considerable when it comes to all of your bonsai work. I don't think that you should feel that there's pressure for any of them. Anyway, so that was they were the big lessons that I picked up from this repotting season. I thought I'd share with you guys. So in my bonsai thoughts over the last couple of weeks, something popped in my head when I was talking to somebody, and they asked me about a technique for wound management, which involved the use of aluminium foil over a wound, and a process which accelerated, or has been reported to accelerate, the healing process for cambium growth over a cut site. And that's however that works is however it works, and whatever the methods involved in wound management are fine. But I suppose I wanted to pose a question, which is a thought that bounces around my head quite a bit when it comes to bonsai, and is progress negative? So doing things differently, or using different techniques, or changing, for instance, particle size or components of your soil mix, is it negative? Does it mean that we're forever going down the rabbit hole, and the further we go, the muddier it becomes and the harder it becomes to work out what actually worked for you? And can we ever come back to what the best was? Like, how does constantly changing things and looking for better all the time impact us and how our trees grow? Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to, by changing methods or changing processes, we're trying to improve or get a better result. I was going to say a quicker result, but quicker's not better. Trying to get a better result for our satisfaction with our bonsai. And that's really what it's about. It's not, as I've said 100 times before, I don't give a stuff about what anyone else thinks about my trees. As long as I look at them and I get enjoyment out of it, perfect. I mean, you can style a tree to look like a American gangster rapper's hair if you want, and if that makes you happy, well, great. It's not what I'd enjoy, but it definitely is something that I think that, if that's what you enjoy, then go for it. I mean, there's going to be certain parameters and boundaries with health of the tree and doing certain things, but that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, if we're always striving for better in bonsai and we're striving for the best, how do we actually know when we've got there? If you go back and look at where a lot of information came from with the old bonsai magazines, Bonsai Today, I'm looking at a shelf full of them, and I remember as a young kid reading those things and being bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and thinking, wow, this is amazing. Look at these techniques and look at this. Wow, can that really work? And now I look back at them and think, oh, it's pretty, that's not how we do it anymore. That's not the best management practices that we can use to get the most out of our trees and to make them as healthy as we possibly can. Because everything we do with our trees has to maximise their strength and their well-being, because that's goal number one, is forget the design side, forget your satisfaction, it's about the health of the tree. Because if you've got a happy, healthy tree, all the other stuff becomes possibilities. If you're not focusing on the health of the tree whenever you're working with it, then you've got no chance of having that tree around for a long term. Even if it does look nice now, it doesn't mean it's going to look nice in the years to come. So, when you look at the old Japanese magazines from their show, the books from their shows, and you look at, like, you can see a clear line in the sand. For instance, the decandling process that was started in Japan, when that rolled out and we started to see results of it in a short period of time about what decandling to do to pines, all of a sudden the pines that were put on show changed and they looked different, like much different. And I wouldn't say that they looked different as in a bad thing. I would say they looked different as in they looked much more healthy, and the focus changed from sort of a deprivation of resources to a pine to keep its needle length short and its internodes nice and tight, to being a complete flip on its head, where you feed it aggressively and then you take off the growth and you manage the feeding process after you've decandled to end up with tighter internodes and shorter needles, and it gives a far more appealing growth pattern for bonsai specifically on Japanese black pine. So in that case, the progress is really, really positive. But when does it get to the point where it gets too pointy and we start maybe going down the path of turning our back on what the best is, just because there's something out there that's different? And I think that, there's a lot of people around the world that will trial and test things and provide, feedback on things, and some I listen to, some I don't. But if they're solid in what they do, then I definitely listen to what they say, because I think the progress can be really, really positive. And there's a lot of things that you can learn about the horticultural process of growing trees in pots that maybe gets glanced over when your primary focus is on learning wiring and pruning techniques and stuff like that. And that's where I think repotting really brought it to the fore for me, because you're focusing on what I believe 110% is the most important part of the tree, in the roots. And if you get those roots right, really the top part looks great. So whenever I'm repotting a tree, I look at the flow and feel of the tree and design of the tree for repotting angles and positioning in the pots and all that sort of stuff. But I can tell you that my primary focus is, if I do a really good job now, if I can do the best I possibly can with repotting this tree, then I'm going to see the results of it. Maybe not straight away, but in 2-3 years down the track, when I look back on this tree, I'm going to go, wow, that looks great. And someone says to me, what did you do? What's the magic bullet? What's the one thing, if I change, that if I do that, my trees will look like yours? And without a doubt, it's focus on the roots. Always, it's focus on the roots of the tree. If you can get those right, then suddenly you've got a tree that when you do design it and you do style it and you do put pressure on it and you do tear fibres, that tree is strong enough to go through that process and come out the other side. So I think that focusing on new methods when it comes to repotting can be positive, and keeping an open mind to things and looking at the people that are providing, or where the advice is coming from, to make sure that it's solid and it's not some door-to-door salesman that's coming kicking in your front door saying, here, put this on your trees when you repot them and I guarantee you they're going to be okay. It's like, okay, well, how do you know? Can you show me what it does? What's it done with your trees and how long have you been using it for? I think that if you can keep in the back of your mind that, yes, progress is bloody good. Progress is great, and we should all progress to being better at bonsai, no matter who we are. But make sure that it's from a solid foundation, and keep that open mind to it, and go, well, okay, all right. So you think I should do this, and that's where I get really wary with potting mixes and changing things there, and that's where I know that there's possibly better ways of doing things. And maybe different medium that I could use, and maybe I'd get a different result or a better result. But right now, there's nothing significant in anywhere that I can see that would make me go, okay, well, that tree, I can improve the health of that tree by 50% by doing this one simple change, because I feel that I've done enough research in the background, and I've picked my mix, and I've picked based on my climate and my fertilising and everything that I do and my trees that I've got, and got it to the point where I can go, you know what, I'm pretty happy with the results that I'm getting. I'm not looking at reducing mortality rates from my trees, or looking at trying to improve ramification on my deciduous trees because my internodes are too long, and long internodes comes from rapid root growth, and I'm not looking to slow that stuff down by the potting mix. So I think that you've got to definitely keep an eye on where we've come from. There's definitely learnings that are ancient in our hobby that I think will stick with us for a very long time. But there's definitely some new stuff around the corner that we've all got to stay open-minded to. And when it comes along, assess it. Don't jump into it. Don't take the tree that you love and make that the scapegoat for some wild fantasy idea that, maybe not now. Like I said, bonsai, it's not going to happen overnight. Like, you're not going to change your mix and suddenly go, oh, look at that, tomorrow it's changed colour and a week later it's dead. It's going to be a very slow, gradual thing. It might be that, if it's a deciduous tree, maybe the growth's not strong enough and you can't defoliate it this year. The next year, you get to the growing season and suddenly there's a lot of dieback in the branches. So that's how things appear in a very slow time frame. When it's slow to us, in the tree's life, it's not that slow, but things take a long time to rear their ugly heads when we do these things. So I'd definitely suggest that you keep an open mind to progress and to change and looking at different techniques. Just do it with that air of caution and do your investigation, do your research, and let's see if we can make the bonsais as happy, as healthy as we possibly can, because ultimately as I say to everybody, they're going to outlast us well and truly, as they should. So, and that's got to be your focus. So, in this edition of What's on the Bench, I thought I would pick one of my favourite trees, Pinus sylvestris. It's the Scots Pine. I love them. I think they are absolutely 100% perfectly suited to bonsai culture. They thrive as bonsai. We put them into a nice open mix. Their roots grow really, really well. They respond. They love fertiliser. They absolutely love it. The more fertiliser I pump into them, the more they back bud, and their needle length is fairly consistent from year to year. The growth does get quite dense, so I find that once I've got my pads styled and shaped, a year, 2 years later, the pads are quite full, and I'm constantly having to thin them out to make sure that they're not getting a lot of dieback on the inner parts. They're flexible, so from a wiring perspective, there's not a lot to worry about with wrapping branches and bending them. I do use raffia on the heavy bends, but all in all, I've found them to be really, really flexible. And the wire may need to stay on the branches a little bit longer. They may bounce back a little bit once the wire's removed. I use copper on all my Scots Pines, but after 3-4 years with wire off and on, the branches are pretty much set in place, and there might be the odd guy wire here and there that I use to keep the branches in place, but that's pretty much it. So I find that from that point of view, they're really good. They have awesome bark. As they get older and older, the bark really starts to flake up on them as well. So when you're looking at buying stock, maybe have a look at trying to see what the bark looks like lower down the trunk, because if you pick a species or pick a variety that's got nice bark there, then later in bonsai life you're going to be well rewarded for it. They suit multiple styles, almost every style I've seen Scots Pines in. My personal preference for them is as an informal upright. I think they make a fantastic informal upright with their movement and rugged nature. They develop really fast. This, like I said, this back budding in an open mix. They don't like heavy wet mixes. You'll find that they'll sort of struggle with that, and the growth will be pretty haphazard. But a nice open mix of a pumice and scoria based mix, you'll find that they'll take off. Repotting wise, normally for me, 3 to 5 years is about a ballpark range. Once they start to get difficult to water, and using a moisture meter or something like that, if I find that I'm putting that into the core of the root ball, and I'm finding it bone dry even after I've watered multiple times, and it's time for me to flag that one to be repotted next season. But repotting's a breeze with them too. I've never had them where they've had an issue, removing the 25-30% of the root ball thereabouts to go back into the same pot. Never had them miss a beat with the correct aftercare for repotting. They will backbud quite aggressively, and one of the strategies that I use is with heavy feeding of the trees, and then come around about the spring, like soon now, the candles will start to grow. The candles will be broken off as they sort of start to elongate and get too long, and then I'll do a bit of a prune around about October, November, and cut into the new growth as well to sort of bring me back to my silhouette. And that's for the healthier Scots Pines. That's when you'll find that they'll backbud as well. So I would never do it on a weakened tree. A tree that wasn't aggressively growing, that wasn't super strong, I wouldn't use that method this year. I'd leave it for another year, keep feeding it throughout, let it get a little bit longer. Again, I'm not worried if the growth gets a little bit too long, because they will backbud back to where there are needles. They won't backbud to where they've got the corky bark on their branches and stuff like that. So you've got generally a 1 to 2 year window for backbudding, no longer. So as long as you're keeping the food up to the tree and it's in a nice mix, in a very sunny position, they love full sun. Every Scots Pine I've got is in 100% sun position. Then I find that the growth stays nice and compact. I get to do my additional prune later in the year, October, November. I force a lot of backbudding that then start to grow come the following spring. So the cycle for looking after them as a single flush pine is relatively simple, relatively easy, and they suit a very wide range of pots. Me personally, I would never put it into a glazed pot, but they definitely suit more freeform pots and slabs. They look great on a slab of anything. They look great in unglazed pots of all different sizes and shapes. So they're very versatile from that point of view. And they, like I said, the silhouette and the classical shaping. I love classical Japanese style bonsai, as among a range of many other styles. But that's one that I love, and I think that the Scots Pines definitely go down that path where they take on that form that you expect when you look at a pine bonsai, and I love them. So perfectly suited for what we do. And as far as pest and disease, I've found them that they are prone to spider mites, and that cracking, the crackly bark where the spider mites love to get in and hide can be a bit of an issue. As well as pine algids, which sort of present around the buds, especially the new buds that are growing. You'll get like a white fluffy sort of growth at the end there, the pine algids. So I look after them preventatively with spraying. During the winter months, I use lime sulphur when they're dormant, as I've mentioned before. And then I move into a preventative spray where I'm using, a couple of different insecticides and a fungicide to stay on the front foot with them. As the pine algids sort of come along, then I will go along with a contact insecticide, and I'll make sure that I'm pretty much coating them with the insecticide. And all in all, having them in a very sunny spot that's got great air movement around it. They've got strong roots. You're feeding them really well. You haven't flogged them within an inch of them into their life every single week. You'll find that even when they do get these little issues, these infestations or problems with pests, then it's not really a problem. It's not going to have a long-term effect on them because they're healthy enough to get through it anyway. So by keeping an eye on it, looking at them every day, as soon as I start to see something happening on 2 or 3 of the buds, that's the day that I'll spray them and I'll take action. I find that when I let it slip and slide for, a week, and I go, it's Monday, I'll do it next weekend, and you get out there on the weekend, suddenly you go, Monday it wasn't that bad, but now the next weekend it's completely covered across the tree. And then that's when you start to see the impact. That's when the resources of the tree, the strength of the tree starts to fail, and you start to see an impact of these things where you should have taken action earlier. And so, anyway, just a reminder that that's the time to take action. And if you haven't got a Scots Pine, get into it. And if you have got a Scots Pine, then hey, if you're struggling with it, or it's maybe not kicking goals like you'd expect, get in touch with me, because I'm more than happy to share any resources that I've come across to sort of push them along to the next level, because I reckon that they're a great, really long-term classical bonsai for all of us. So as you all know, I love hearing from you. I really do. Like, I don't just say it and don't get back to people. I really, really enjoy hearing from you. And since the last podcast, I had a listener in Pennsylvania, Fred, get in touch. If you're listening, Fred, thank you very much, and I'm looking to stay in touch with you. You gave me a great idea, and it's not my idea. I'm not going to claim credit for it, but it's called, it's going to be called Getting Dirty, and this is where Fred's suggestion was that he loves the podcast, but he wants to get nerdy on things, and go through the lessons that I've found on a certain tree, and how it's evolved, and what I've learnt from it, and what I've changed, and what the impacts of those changes were. And I've got about half a dozen trees that I want to work my way through. So this is sort of a heads up for the next podcast that's going to be coming along. It's going to be this Getting Dirty, and I want to talk to you about a particular tree. I'm not going to give it away now, but a particular tree that I've had for quite a while that I learnt a lot with. And each year, one year I nearly lost it. Next year I got really super long growth and nearly destroyed my structure. And there's different things that I've done with that tree, and I've followed things that I've heard and things that I'd read, and before I'd actually found out and asked the question why and how does that work. And once I started doing that, my process started to refine, and I started to get more efficient, as I said earlier, with how I started to manage my trees. And this is one that went through that whole process with me, and I think it's a testament to just how strong trees are, as to what I did to it. When I look back on it now and think, you're an idiot. You never should have been allowed to be someone who has a podcast and talks to people about how to get through with bonsai and how to make them better and stronger, because you sort of a long time ago did the most stupid things, and that's what this Down and Dirty is going to be about. And that's why I really thank you Fred for sort of opening my eyes to it, because I think it's going to be really interesting. I'm excited about it, and I think that there's going to be a lot of lessons learnt, and if I can, I always think with bonsai, if I can make the path of your bonsai journey from A to B as efficient and happy and productive as I possibly can in any single way, then my job's done. So I think that if I can be open and honest and lay a few things on the table and say, well, okay, this is where I went wrong, and this is what I did to fix it, then, and as Fred said, maybe link it to a few photos on the website and stuff like that we can have a look at, then yeah, that hopefully provides lessons and where things can get to, and hopefully it provides some kind of light at the end of the tunnel for at least one person out there listening. So that's definitely due to come on for the next podcast. So again, thank you, Fred. Really appreciate it, mate. And we're done for another episode of the podcast, Bonsai Stuff. I hope you've enjoyed it. I really enjoy. I don't enjoy hearing my own voice, but I do enjoy the fact that from the feedback that I get, that it may inspire people to look at their trees differently, or even just ask questions and look to expect more from yourself and from your bonsai, and to sort of aim for bigger and better things for yourself. It's awesome. It's great, It's part of the fundamental of what I do. It's inspire, inform, involve. That's the three things that I've built Bonsai Matsu, my bonsai business on, is to try and provide inspiration and then the know-how to do it, and then the involvement of other people to do it. it's not a one-way street. It's not just sit back and watch or listen. It's become actively involved and work on taking what you've got. And I'm not just talking about your bonsai. I'm talking about you as a person, as an individual. And it's a bonsai is a canvas, and how we present what we do on that canvas should not be about anyone else but yourself. And it's about 100% your enjoyment that you get. And if I can provide a pathway or a knowledge base that allows you to achieve that, then hey, job done. So I'm happy. So we're at the end of the podcast. I have a little public service announcement. I've started a YouTube channel, so please check out Bonsai Matsu on YouTube and subscribe. There are going to be lots of short instructive videos there as well. There's a couple there now. There's a longer one on repotting. So it's going to be a knowledge resource, a lot like the podcast, which is going to grow infinitely over time, and as things develop and advance and things change, and like we talked earlier today about progress. Well, maybe that's probably the perfect platform for me to present things like that as well. So please stay in touch. You want to contact me via the socials, Instagram or Facebook, via the website bonsaimatsu.com, email scott@bonsaimatsu.com. Whatever it is, no matter what the question is or however you'd like to get in touch, please do. And take care of yourself. Look after yourself, which is what we all have to do around the world at the moment. We're all in exactly the same boat. And I'm looking forward to the day that we can have forgotten about the word COVID-19. So look after yourself, spend the time with your trees, and take care. So I'll speak to you next. Happy bonsai.